Having just started the 3D era, it was kind of interesting to go right back to 2D. But I've heard these games are pretty good, so I went in with high hopes. Right out the gate, I really like the graphics. This is a great 2D scale down of the 3D appearances, and the zones are super detailed. I particularly liked a lot of the traversal elements of the stages, especially in Angel's Island Zone. Those balls where you have to stand on top of them and run were a lot of fun, and the zip lines in the secret base zone were also a lot of fun. This is where I will have my rant though, because I cannot understand after all these 2D games that I've played why anyone ever thinks water levels in Sonic are fun. If there's one thing I'll probably make a name for myself in this community for, it's my utter hatred of Sonic water levels. They are never fun, and take the speed and momentum out of the series that is built on those two principles. This argument comes out of this game because of the nonsense that is Ice Mountain Zone. There isn't even too much water in these acts, but the water that is there is super annoying, and the boss fight in particular took me so many tries because the whole thing takes place underwater. The other boss fights were pretty fun, though, albeit a lot of Eggman as per usual. Knuckles and Metal Knuckles were a fun touch in Angel Island Zone, though. Moving on from that rant, though, as much fun as I had with this game, it isn't without its problems. For some reason, someone over at Dimps must have been absolutely obsessed with the idea of pop-up spikes in the environment, especially on the edge of ledges that you need to jump up to. Not that it was hard, it was just super annoying how often they were placed in every zone. There were also the bottomless pits. Now, I watch a lot of gaming YouTube, and every time this game is brought up, complaints about the bottomless pits are sure to follow. I always assumed that they were exaggerating, but as I got to Egg Rocket, it became very obvious they very much were not. I would say 90% of my deaths in this game were from the game shooting me on something like a spring, and then straight into a pit. The first thing that stood out to me with this entry was that there was such a strong sense of speed. There's a couple things contributing to this, but I think the primary thing was the phantom copies following Sonic as you started to pick up speed. They would come so subtly at first, with a quick break in the sound barrier before they show up. On a minor note, the other thing that I think contributed was the Sonic sprite itself. The devs did a really good job making him look super determined. He walks and runs with purpose and attitude, and I think that fits the character so well and gives Sonic that extra bit of personality I feel like he misses sometimes in the modern age. I think if there was anything I wasn't too happy with, it's the bosses. The auto-scrolling stages messed me up quite a bit, and figuring out what was an acceptable hitbox for these bosses while also trying to stay in the right place for depth perception made these super frustrating. I understand it's fully a skill issue on my end, but something I did quite find intrusive. On the bright side of this, at least there was a large amount of rings in most of the boss stages, and if you gamed over, all that had to be redone was the zone you were in. Still not my favorite, but better than having to do the whole game over like the others in this genre. Speaking of zones, I was a big fan of the designs and obstacles here. Stuff like the grind rails and swing bars kept the momentum flowing through the levels, and I love the seamless transition between the upper, middle, and lower tracks of the level. This is obviously something a lot of other 2D Sonic games have, but this entry stood out to me enough to mention it. A lot of my issues with the first game are also mostly gone. I encountered far less obstacles that were horribly placed, and I did experience some bottomless pits, but it never quite felt as severe as the first entry. Beyond the graphics and mechanics, of course the highlight, like any other time, is the music. This is true to all Sonic games, but these ones had me hyped, especially the level transition tracks. But calling the soundtrack in a Sonic game great is like saying the sky is blue, so I don't have to dwell on that. Now I'm going to be open here. I only played the first zone of this game. I have my reasons why I'll get into, but I wanted to state that out of the gate. The other two Sonic Advance games were pretty solid, but just within the first act of this game, I could tell that this was a far different experience, and not one that I wanted to put my patience into. But with that disclaimer out of the way, I'll get into my reasoning. As soon as I started speeding through Route 99, I noticed right away that the level designer from Sonic Advance was clearly rehired, as around every single corner of every single platform was pop-up or permanent spikes, like a sadistic amount in the first few minutes. There were so many times that I would build up a decent speed and then immediately be brick-walled by spikes or this entry's new addition, purposely placed enemies to mess with you as much as it can. It felt like they knew exactly where to place every enemy to be in the most inconvenient place possible. I would chalk this up to me being terrible at games, which I am, for sure, at times, but this really felt intentional, as it was always right where the fastest parts of the level lead. There were also the platforms that just let go the second you step on them, which wouldn't be a problem on its own, except it's mixed with everything else to just make one more frustrating mechanic. Not to mention, these platforms also don't look any different than the actual platforms you can stand on, which made my problem even worse. I don't know if it gets better as the game continues, but if the game's first impression is telling the player that the level hates you and wants you to lose a life, it's not a game I want to spend more time on. It's a shame, too, because this game has a lot going for it. The actual zone design beyond the obstacles is really a fun course to go through. All of my favorite movement options are back from the previous game, with the actual size of the act feeling like it was doubled. When the game isn't trying to stop you, you can build up some crazy speed and tricks. Not to mention the new concept of a hub world. I won't say that this is my favorite thing, but it's a neat concept to try, and I'm sure if I got deeper in the zone hub worlds, would have probably gotten more complex. I really liked the opening cutscene. It does a lot to get you hyped for the game ahead, and it's a shame I left it for now. I debated including this game in Sonic Saturday, because although it does don the Sonic franchise name, it also includes boards based on Nights into Dreams and Samba de Amigo. However, I ultimately decided to include it, seeing as the main story mode of the game is entirely Sonic, so I believe it fits here. Now, viewers of the channel will remember a couple months back, I did a video where I played all the different Nintendo pinball games they've done over the years, so I was looking forward to this episode to continue to play pinball games from this era. I'm a huge fan of pinball as both real-life game and virtual, and the fact that this one had a story is always interesting to me. It's basic, for sure. It's only a basic bracket system where you fight different Sonic characters in a tournament to get to Eggman, but I appreciate that it's here nonetheless. In terms of physics, I felt like this game was fairly smooth, and I was super happy to see that just in case something does go wrong or the ball gets stuck on something, the game allows you to shake the table to knock it loose and keep things moving. I did find I had a small amount of trouble being precise with my aim, but I never felt like it was bad enough to ruin any of the fun. One of the biggest pros to this game is how well the different games are integrated into the format. The table decorations are super well done, and I love the fact that you can defeat Eggman on the Sonic boards across different zones and collect medallions on the Knights board. I would love to see a complete Sega pinball game at some point, because what's here is already great. On top of the boards of pinball, there's also mini games you unlock along the way. It took me forever to understand what I was doing, but I enjoyed the roulette one quite a bit once I got the point of the game. Still had horrible luck in it though. This was one of those Sonic games that I actually didn't know existed before researching for this series. So going into it, it was entirely new to me. I don't even know what type of game this was until I played it. After playing it, I of course have thoughts. The first thing was how nice this game looked. Not only the sprites of all the characters, but even the 3D battle arenas are well designed. All of the GBA games have looked great, and I'm always amazed at how well they're able to push the hardware. For gameplay, I personally found it pretty repetitive. When I first started, I was having a good amount of fun finding and trying all the new moves from Sonic, but as the game progressed and I was only a number of battles in, I found that it just ended up getting super repetitive. Especially in the rounds where the KO cap was higher, like the first 10 ones. There was a mix of difficulty, but all of the fights just ended up in the same cycle over and over again until eventually one of you gets the KO count. The storyline was actually pretty cool though, and it was a nice twist to the general collect all the Chaos Emeralds idea that every other Sonic game follows, because now you're also training a robot and using the emeralds to power up that robot. The scrolling text boxes do make things feel a little slow, but that's just a problem I have with text boxes in general, not this game in particular. If I were to have one more small critique of the game, it's that sometimes the battles ended up behind a structure in the map, and although it wasn't too often, when it did happen, it did get a little annoying because I could no longer follow where I was in the arena. This is a super small nitpick, but I feel like it was worth mentioning.